our other platforms. So I'll just say a very, very big welcome. We're coming to you, Wade Northausen from Billboard Battalion from Emerald in more or less central Queensland. So this is part of our tour that we're doing around Australia. So we're here to talk to as many people in the Emerald area as we can and really try to reach out to the agricultural industry. We've got people from other walks of life who are certainly interested in the freedom movement, or more importantly, what's actually happening throughout the world. And many people call it the freedom movement, which I suppose that's how it started. But at the end of the day, it's going to affect every man, woman and child in Australia, the things that we're going to talk about. So just a bit of an idea for the people who haven't been catching up with us for the last few days. We kicked off from Victoria around about a week ago. Now we've got up to New South Wales. We've done meetings in New South Wales, and we're up into Queensland. We've got another, this is the last one for the Queensland leg at the minute. After we're finished here at Emerald, we'll be going back to Rockhampton. In the morning, we're heading off from Rockhampton back to Brisbane and getting on another plane there and heading to Perth. So there's a fair bit going on. We didn't intend on covering this much territory. However, we've had calls from people all over the place who want Billboard Battalion to come and speak and present at their areas and their regions and their communities. So therefore, that's why we're heading to Western Australia a lot earlier than what we had planned on doing. So, as I've said, this tour is about trying to speak a lot to the agricultural sector, and there is a reason for that. Traditionally, the agricultural sector is very conservative. So conservative that in many cases they're quite prepared to do nothing when everything is on the line. We've seen, and I might just go back to a bit of history here. My family got involved in the agricultural politics back in the mid-80s because we saw many of our farmers who were being attacked by the banks. Back in those days, the banks started to really quite literally unlawfully foreclose on farmers and shut them down and start taking over land, putting together portfolios that were, the old get big or get out. And as we've seen now, around about 40 odd years later, there's a reason for that. And what we have seen is from government and the people who run them, a transition from Australian family-owned farms to multinational corporates, and the multinational corporates, in many cases, are part of the organisations that we're about to talk about. The whole idea, excuse me, the whole idea is to get rid of farming in Australia completely, and not only that, across the entire world. So my history, if you like, that gives us the knowledge to speak about this, started in the mid-80s and then proceeded right through till now. And back in the mid-80s, we started to hear people that they called the conspiracy theorists. And many of these conspiracy theorists, and I learned very quickly that's the wrong term, were saying things that are happening so much as there's some sort of an overall grand plan. There's some sort of a push to a one world government. There's some sort of a push to an authority which takes over every country, all the governments, total control of everything happens on the whole planet. And as we've seen, that is in fact happening. So the people that I used to listen to, and I'd hear them talk, and I'd say, well, let's have a look at what they're telling us and match that up to what was happening. And very quickly, I started to work out that our governments were lying to us, and the plans that they were talking about were in fact well and truly underway, and that in the farming side of it, we were starting to see that government policy was making it quite hard to farm and be on the land, and this was quite a deliberate thing. So I just wanted to say a couple of things about how we gather knowledge, how we gather information. And some people will get on a computer and they'll sit there for hours and hours. Some people, as I have done, you know, we've lived through a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today. We've been there and seen it and done it. And where a lot of people might say, where do I see this stuff? Where's the link to this stuff? Well, in many cases, it's a link to my life and the experiences I've actually had with many, many other people. There are no links to it. This is based on the evidence that we have gathered from being in the fight and being in this particular area. There also are many things that that you can research that are online, and I suggest that people, you know, take the interest and do that. There are many groups and organisations getting around, and we put up links to stuff as well. So when people say, where do you get this information? You know, there's a very, very broad cross-representation of where this comes from. So I just wanted to make a few of those points to start with, because we do quite often get, you know, where are the links to what you're talking about? And it's hard to have links to things that happened quite a number of years ago, right up till today. If you're not, not everybody had mobile phones with cameras and things. So a lot of the stuff hasn't been recorded, but trust me, what we're saying is true. So I haven't only been involved in agricultural politics. I've had a lot to do with Aboriginal politics going back to 1997, where I first started to take an interest in that, because similarly, we started to hear all about what's happening with Aboriginals and how so discriminated against, and we're now starting to see, you know, they wanted to bring in policies to do away with racial discrimination. And I think I, along with everybody else, thought that's a great idea. Absolutely support that. However, quite often there's a but. And the but is that when I started to look into this, because I was hearing things from our politicians and our laws and legislation that didn't add up. I thought, we're supposedly doing away with racial discrimination, but the things that they were talking about bringing in to do with this actually were going to bring us more racial discrimination. And that turned out to be true. So once again, you get a marker that your politicians are just liars. They just lie to you continuously. So therefore the question is, of course, why are they doing this? And as we'll touch on soon, that's because our politicians are not working for you at all. They're not working for us. So I wanted to start by saying that, you know, we see many of the people who talk about we are just conspiracy theorists. We are just nutters and tinfoil hat wearing crackpots and all the rest of it. But the fact is that that is not the case, because as I say to anybody, and I do a lot of meetings and presentations, the things that I'm telling you here, if you think what I'm saying is incorrect or wrong, if your politicians think that, then you tell your politicians, I'm prepared to publicly debate them on any platform they want, a sitting politician, and we'll take it to task and let's see what they've got. But you won't see them. You won't see them come up and say, okay, we'll take weight on, we'll debate him. Because what I'm saying is simply the truth. These are the facts. These are not theories. These are what your politicians are doing to you. And I must say, if we go down that path, I want people to consider what's happening right now. And only just days ago in the Australian Federal Parliament, in the Senate, they voted in favour of bringing in a digital identity system for Australia. Now, for years and years, we've had the people say, that's just a conspiracy theory. These people, why would they do that? They'd never do that. You're just crazy. Well, at the end of the day, they only just days ago passed that in the Australian Senate. So for the people who think that this is wrong or incorrect, I suggest you have a good hard look at that, because that happened. That is undisputable. Those are the facts. And the thing is about that that's weird is they've done it back to front. Normally they bring legislation between to the lower house, goes through that first, then it has to be passed by the Senate. So this is odd. And not only is it odd in that way, it's odd in they were not allowed to have any discussion. There was no debate before the vote was sprung upon people. So this is weird. But the point is, this happened. It's not a theory, it's a fact. And that's going to have an enormous impact on every Australian's life. So we also need to look at the digital currency. This is something that a lot of people said, oh, look, what do you mean they're going to do away with cash? They'll never do that. That's just crazy. They'll never do away with cash. Well, how many people have seen now banks closing down, seeing that they're pulling out ATMs, and you've got your banks saying, well, we only deal with cash on these days, or you have to order it in advance, or you have to tell the bank if it's a certain amount what you intend to spend it on. This is happening. This is real. More and more people are reporting this is going on. And also, if we look last year, the Australian Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, said that we are going to have a digital currency. And for very, very important reasons to all of our community, including our farmers, this is a very serious dot point, that Jim Chalmers said our currency is going to be programmable. And this is very, very important to everything in this country. And what that does is that gives the government, who work for the World Economic Forum and the United Nations and the World Health Organization, that's who they work for, that will give them the power to stop you buying anything they don't want you to buy. And that is going to be, in a big part of that will be food. I'm here to tell you right now. So when we look at the digital the digital currency, well, the Australian Treasurer has told us it's here. So for the people who think this isn't real, or they don't need to know, or that's not going to affect their life, I suggest they get very seriously with the program very quick, because it absolutely is going to. And another thing that we've got coming up very, very soon at the end of May is, for those who may or may not know, the World Health Organization International Pandemic Treaty. And what that's about is the countries who are members of the World Health Organization, of which Australia is, will have a vote on whether or not we sign up to a worldwide pandemic treaty. In the short story is that what that would do, if we go that way, is that one man who runs the World Health Organization, or he's in charge of it, he's got that position, can make a declaration to say that somewhere in the world there is a pandemic of international importance. Now, that is and can be whatever he decides. Anything at all, whether there's anything real, whether it's not, and they'll tell you it's about your health. Well, ultimately it is, but the World Health Organization is not in the business of saving lives. They're in the business of taking them. So how could that affect us here? They could just declare any kind of a pandemic, whether it's true or not, and then say, in essence, they get to take total control of our country. They get to take total control. This is where it's at. And if they say that they're not about control, yes, they are. They're liars. These people are terrorists. The three major terrorist groups are the WEF, the UN and the WHO. And people need to get this through their mind and understand these are the facts. And if And let's look at our farmers again. If the WHO decided to declare a pandemic of international importance and call it climate change. Now let's have a look. Everybody is getting bombarded with these lies, the fraud of climate change, from our media, our politicians, to they're bashing the kids to death with it in the schools. They've got kids that are so terrified that they're going to die from climate change, they're hysterical in the streets. And this is a very specific thing that they're doing, that's deliberate. They want that reaction. And if they came along and said, well, under climate change, we now have a pandemic, which they are talking about, then they would then have the power to say, well, we are going to shut down whatever is causing climate change. And that, keep in mind, it's all a fraud. The whole thing is a fraud. So they make it sound as if they're correct, but they are not. And one of the things that they would be able to shut down under this pandemic treaty would be agriculture, food production, your ability to grow food, your right to feed yourself. And the evidence points to the fact that this is exactly where they're going. This is the evidence. Because as I said, all we hear is this garbage about climate change. They ram it down your throat, so they have been for years. But if we look at where climate change started, they used to call it global warming. Around about the start of the 90s, they started talking to us about global warming. And in fact, we saw our so-called climate scientists, the experts, who were telling us that if we don't do something to fight climate change, this is in the mid-90s, the early 90s, then by the year 2000, the polar ice caps will have melted by the year 2000. Now, I must say, as I constantly do, the polar ice caps 25 years later are still there. So the science was crap. It's garbage, it's lies. Because many of these scientists, they're not scientists at all. They are paid political activists. That is all they are. And as I can tell you from a lot of the so-called science I've dealt with, these people are paid to sabotage your life and your country. They are paid to present evidence, which is all lies, that supports the government pushing these climate change agenda. So at the end of the day, when we see the results of what they warned us about, by 2000 the polar ice caps will be melted, half the Pacific island nations will be flooded, they'll be underwater, and other huge areas of landmass from other countries will be flooded. And as it's turned out, none of that happened. Not one bit. In fact, if you look at the satellite photographs, the polar ice caps are actually growing. And the polar bears didn't all die out, they're all still there and multiplying. So we were lied to, and for a very specific reason. Climate change, or as I said, it was called global warming when they first started, but they had to turn it to climate change because the place wasn't warming. Big problem. If you're telling everyone about climate change, it's going to wipe you out, global warming, and it doesn't start warming, well, you got a big problem. So how to sell it? They turned it to climate change. So when we look at where that's gone, the warnings that we were given failed. The so-called scientists, remember the old saying, trust the science. And we've heard this through all the climate change rubbish, the lies, and also in the so-called pandemic that we've just supposedly gone through. Trust the science. And we'll have a look at that very soon. But the scientists, if you hear them on the television and you hear them supporting things that the government are doing, well, my advice would be assume that these people are lying to you. And they're lying to you for a very good reason for themselves. And I did have a conversation with a woman I know there a while ago, and who, hands up anybody who's seen the meme going around, 97% of scientists agree with whoever's paying them. And we've got anybody who's, yeah, okay. Exactly. So I put it to her, that very point. I said, 97% of these climate scientists, they agree with whoever's paying them. And she looked at me and she said, you do realise I am a climate scientist. And I said, yep, yeah, I do. So go figure. So at the end of the day, when we see what the scientists tell us and then we see the reality happen, we understand they're just filling us up with crap. They're working for a payroll. They come up with the answers they're told to, pretty well the size of it. There are a number of scientists who are the honest ones these days, but they're the ones that are shut down by the media. They're the ones that have their funding pulled by governments, and those are the ones who cop flack all the time. They're called, you know, the conspiracy theorist ones, and they, what's the latest term? Spreading misinformation. So I think that, you know, we need to wear that as a badge of honour. If we're told about how we're spreading misinformation, we better understand that's a badge of honour, and we wear that with pride, because the people who are the liars, the ones actually spreading misinformation, are your governments and your mainstream media, and they are deliberately doing that. So I want to have a quick look at, when we talk about your governments, who are they working for? And for those who may or may not know, and keep in mind, you know, there'll be some people watching this who've never heard of this stuff before, because, you know, we're trying to get into new audiences, to new people who this is new to. So a little bit of background. The organisations I mentioned, the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and the UN, they've been working very, very hard for a long, long time to gradually buy off the politicians, to corrupt the politicians, and to get people who are World Economic Forum young global leaders into governments around the world. And they've been very successful. And, you know, it's not a good look on people of Australia in a democratic country where we are quite happy to let this happen, because we work on the theory of, yep, she's right, mate, no worries, nothing to panic about. Well, there certainly is something to be very, very concerned about. And we have dropped the ball. And these people have infiltrated our governments and our bureaucracies and many of our big corporates. These people have taken over this, and now they are implementing their policies. And I must say that if people think that, you know, the World Economic Forum, who's that? They couldn't do this. So I say that the WEF has an annual meeting in Davos in Switzerland, in which pretty well all the major players in the world governments and world corporations go to see them. They don't come to see the people in the governments. The people in the governments go to see them, where they conspire, where they get their instructions, where they have their secret squirrel meetings and all the rest of it, and work out how to get rid of us. And for the people who might question that, are they intending on getting rid of people? You bet. Absolutely. If you look at the documentation from the World Economic Forum, you look at the videos from there, they've got many of the speakers who talk about getting the world down to a population of 500 million people. And the bottom line is, at the minute, we've got just over 8 billion. So when they talk about getting rid of 7.5 billion people, you need to work out what that means. That's not that hard to work out. And where people might say that's just ridiculous, I don't believe they could do that. They've been putting the stuff in place for years and years. The government policies, the whole thing about getting to net zero. You might ask, excuse me, you might ask what that's about. Well, that's about using the fraud of climate change to shut down business, to shut down industry, to shut down jobs, and to shut down the agricultural sector, the food production sector. And for people who might think, well, I don't believe they could do that, then you might remember a bit of a thing that happened around the end of 2021. It's called the lockdowns began for COVID. So these people, given they have put things in place, absolutely have the power to shut down the entire place. And what I'm saying to you is that that is their plan. And if you thought that the lockdowns were a problem, if you think that the jobs that you lost and all the businesses that closed and everything that went to pieces was a problem then, imagine that permanently, because that is exactly where this is going. That is precisely where this is going. Permanent lockdowns, permanent destruction of everything, because they are in the business of taking out 7.5 billion people. And I don't know if people remember, but at the time we had some of these so-called elites, that's what they call themselves, so-called elites who were salivating over the lockdowns and the shutdowns of the planet. And these people, some of the biggest leaders in the world, were saying that COVID gave us a small window of opportunity. Now, anybody who looks at the disaster that was the lockdowns and says that's an opportunity, that should start to tell you everything you need to know. So this stuff is very real. Everything I'm talking about is completely check-outable without any doubt. So we need to start looking at our agricultural sector. And why am I looking at the agricultural sector? Because as a body, an entity, if we could get all the agricultural sector together to understand this stuff, to understand it's real, to understand that if we don't do anything about it, their days are numbered. If we can get them to understand this, then we can turn that into a very effective fighting force. But I must say, we have our work cut out for us, because farmers, generally speaking, as I said, are the most conservative group in the country. And many of them are just so seriously rusted onto the National Party or the Liberal Party. And a lot of these people just listen to these politicians. Many of them are friends, they know them, you know, they get so easily manipulated by these politicians. And now when we talk about the traditional farming politicians, they used to be the Nationals, who were originally the Country Party, or the Liberals, who, you know, they were supposed to be a bit for business, a little bit for country. We have a look at the traditional supporter base of these parties. Let's have a look at Labor. Labor was always supposedly for the working man, the workers, and they brought in the unions. They created the unions. And now the Labor Party is in the business of smashing every job in the country. So they don't support the workers. They don't support anything along the lines. They don't support families, because their policies that they're bringing in are all about destroying everything we're talking about right there. If we look about the Greens, so the Greens are supposed to support what? The environment. So the Greens, once again, are not supporting the environment. The Greens are not looking after the people who support them and vote for them. The Greens are liars, because we're seeing so many policies now with regard to this so-called renewable energy, that the renewable energy sector basically has an open checkbook to destroy as much of the environment as they want. And I must say, well, you would expect to see the Greens coming out in force and complaining about that and protesting about that. You look at the amount of bushland and and mountain tops and hills and so on that they intend to bulldoze over to put in these wind turbines, to put in these transmission lines, or the solar panels. Where are the Greens? I tell you, they're the same as the Labor Party. They've been bought off. They are working for the people I'm talking about, the WEF, the UN and the WHO. That's where the Labor Party and the Greens are. And I would strenuously question this new group that's popping up called the Teals. I'd like to have some meetings with them and ask them some questions. And now let's get down to the Liberal Party. The Libs traditionally were about supporting business. That's what their whole idea was. That's what they supposedly did. Well, the Libs are selling out business. They're helping to support the destruction of our business. And let's look at the Nationals, the Country Party. They traditionally, supposedly, were supporting Australian farmers and rural and regional areas. And I can tell you right now that all of those parties that I've just mentioned are not supporting the people they're supposed to or who vote for them, because they are all a part of the one world government. They're all a part of the WEF, the UN and the WHO. They are not working for us. They are working for the people who want to destroy us. And one of the big problems we have and how this goes is that you'll have the organisations I just spoke about who want to cause us irreparable and permanent harm. But they can't do it because they don't have any kind of a legislative power. And that's what is needed. That's the weapons of war today. They're no longer what we consider as to be a normal war. The weapons are legislation. So how do they get to bring in what they want to do? They get onto the politicians and they infiltrate parties and they sway them, persuade them, whether or not they pay them out, they blackmail them, they put pressure on them. And many of them now just believe that this stuff is great. So they get them to vote on legislation. So this is the big thing. They bring this legislation into Parliament and then they vote on it. And if they pass it, for example, all this climate change stuff, all this getting down to net zero, all the digital ID, the digital currency, the pandemic treaty, and lots and lots of other stuff. Your parliaments vote on this, and that's made up of individual politicians. So that's how these organisations get the power to do what they're talking about doing, because your politicians, most of them, vote in favour of this. And this is where we're at. So a part of what I talk about in solutions is how do we try and stop all this stuff. And one of the things that we need to do is to understand that our politicians, when they're voting, are just individual people. And how they can do this is because we the people, don't get stuck into them. And I don't mean physically, violently by that. What I mean is we have the power to put the pressure on them, physically turn up at their at their offices, at the places where they are, and start running the old-fashioned protests at their offices. The placards, the signage, spreading the leaflets, telling people what this lot are actually doing. And that's the sort of stuff that they can't handle. And this is the sort of stuff that the people who hate us, they need those politicians to vote this stuff in. And I say to you, we're going to have a vote about the World Health Organization pandemic treaty. We need right now to be getting mobile and active on the ground and getting into these politicians and saying, hell no, you're not voting that. Because I'm here to tell you that if they pass that, then they will have the power to shut down your country. Right? I'm not joking. That is the situation. they'll have the power to lock you down and end your businesses, end your families, and end your life. And I mean that literally. So our politicians are their Achilles heels. They're the ones that we can get stuck into. And a big part of what we are doing is trying to organise these kind of things and inform people that this is happening, and help to coordinate, putting groups together, trying to put together the rosters to take these politicians on. Because we all saw, or some people who are watching might not have seen, a thing called Epic. And that was a couple of years ago when they had arguably 1 million people protesting at Canberra at Parliament House. And I know many, many people who were there. I wasn't there, but I know many who were. And if you've had 1 million people, or even 2, or whatever the number is, that's a massive percentage of the Australian people. And in a normal democracy, that would make a massive impact. But the politicians there didn't take any notice. They didn't care. They had no impact, no political impact. And many people put in a big effort, and they made lots of friends, and they did a good job of making networks. They did a lot of good stuff, but they had no impact at all on policy, none. So we need to do it differently. And as I say, these politicians, when they're in their ivory towers in Canberra or whatever, they don't have to worry about us because you can't get to them. But we can get to them if we turn up personally in their space. And just remember, they put their hand up for the job. They are the ones who said, you know, I want to be a politician. They stood for election. So, you know, you might feel a little bit, how you going about giving these people a hard time? Well, just keep in mind that they are voting in policies that are going to end your kids' lives. Quite literally. So when we see these people, we want to make sure that we give it to them, because this is our future right here, right now. And we're in the middle of the crosshairs, and they're about to take the kill shot. And we are running out of time very quickly. So our political parties, and many people have said they're two wings of the same bird, and they are. Because we might think that Labor's shocking and Liberals sort of okay, but they're not, because they are all working for the same group. One will bring in some policies, the others will make it worse. And where we see them say, oh, you know, we hate this one, they hate that one, they see them arguing and squabbling, that's a farce, that's an act, because they don't. Because after Parliament sitting, they all go and be mates. They all get on the grog together and they're all the best of mates. So this is how it works. So when we look at our farmers once again, I want people to consider that I've spoken about, in one aspect, the complete destruction of the red meat industry. Now, for the people who are hard-working and busy trying to make a living, who don't take any notice of this, I suggest that you do. And this is so easy to check out. If you go and look on the WEF and WHO UN websites, you can see all the stuff that they talk about, all the references to getting rid of meat. You hear about the likes of the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and the 17 Sustainable Goals. And they say all this stuff and they make it sound great, like we're going to do away with world hunger. And you might think that's a great idea. But they don't tell you exactly how they're going to do that. So one of the ways they'll do that is get rid of the people who are hungry. That'll fix it. The statistics won't lie. So this is one of the very crucial things. And I don't know if people have noticed, there's a lot of ads going around now for surveys. They want people to respond to surveys and tell them, answers the question is, would you be happy to have less red meat to fight climate change? That's not a joke. That is for real. And at the end of the day, when they say, would you be happy to have less red meat to fight climate change? It's about putting in the idea in people's head that red meat is causing climate change. I've seen many interviews where they'll go out on the streets and they'll talk to these abundantly educated people and they'll say, what do you think about farms causing 33% of the gases that lead to climate change? And I'm quite astounded at the amount of people who sit there and say, oh, well, we've got to get rid of farms. Now, if you think about that for a second, what does that mean? You get rid of your food production. Now, this is not a joke. This is where they're going with this. They are programming really stupid people to accept the idea that our farmers are the enemies of our climate, that our farmers are creating this dangerous, climate change emergency. And now they've actually even gone to call it climate global boiling. I'm not joking. Now, these are the terms that these people who I'm talking about, the leaders of this stuff, are using. And they're using that for a very specific reason, to frighten the hell out of people and get them used to the idea of getting rid of farmers, because farmers are causing climate change. This is a psychological programming that is to indoctrinate these people who, I don't know if they're just stupid or they just don't know any better or they are so easily led. But then this is where it's at, and the things I'm telling you are very real. So for the farmers, and I've spoken to quite a number of the leaders of the so-called farmer representative lobby groups, and I'm horrified that all they talk about is climate change. And I'm horrified the fact that these people do not want to see common sense or reality. They refuse to admit reality. So I have a very specific opinion about many of these people, that they're not living in the real world. They're not representing the farmers and the communities that they claim to be. And in fact, they're only using this as a stepping stone to get into politics. They're only using this as a stepping stone to get to be what I call professional board jumpers. So many of these people are very well off. They're not going to be for much longer, I guarantee that. But many of these people are very well off. They think they're above everything, and they've got plans. And I think that they consider that the members of the organisations they run are just an inconvenient problem. Now, I can say this because I've been a member of a lot of farmer groups, Victorian Farmers Federation, United Dairy Farmers of Victoria. I've been a part of a number of farmer groups. And the bottom line is they are selling us out. They do nothing more than support the policies that governments and their masters want to get rid of farming. Now, I suppose there might be a couple of things where they'll have a bit of a crack for us, but very, very little. And I can tell you right now, I've lived these things. We've been through the water wars. For Victoria, the North-South Pipeline, the Connections Program, which was actually the Disconnections Program. And nationally, the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, the 2007 Water Act, and the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. The whole thing was based on fraud, lies, deception, blackmail, perjury, the whole deal. And when we tried to fight that, the leaders of these organisations tried to squash us. And they just simply signed us up to everything that was bad. The Nationals, I'll just give you an idea of what I was talking about before. And this is relevant to what's happening a lot now in the farming communities in particular, with the rollout of all this destructive renewable energy, so-called renewable energy, which in itself is a complete unworkable fraud. It cannot possibly work. It is a disaster, and they are deliberately doing it to us. But we were in a fight against the North-South pipeline in Victoria, talking to the Libs and the Nats, who they said they won't support it. And if they won the election in 2010, they would have a royal commission into all the illegal activity that happened to bring in the North-South pipeline. That's a long story, very, very short, just a couple of dot points. As it turned out, the organisation that I was working with, Plug the Pipe, we got rid of the Labor Party in 2010. We got the one vote over the line, the one politician over the line that swayed the numbers and turned from a Labor Party Greens disaster into a Liberal Party national disaster. And what I say about that is this: the bloke who became the coalition water minister, Peter Walsh, we'd met with him many, many times. He was on board with the Plug the Pipe. And he said, if we get into government, we will hold a royal commission. Well, as it turns out, we got them into government. And we had a meeting with, my opinion, Peter Walsh, a disaster, and Paul Weller, another National Party MP who's equally as big as a disaster. Shocking, horrendous disasters, in my opinion. And Peter Walsh, the first thing he said to our group was, well, we're not going to have a royal commission. And we were floored, because that was the whole purpose of what we were doing. So he said, we're going to have an ombudsman's report. And keep in mind, he was now the Victorian Water Minister. So the Nats and the Libs sold us out. And this is happening across the country. So I must also, it was pointed out to me that when the Murray-Darling Basin Plan came along, Peter Walsh, who was the Victorian Water Minister and national, was the first water minister in Australia to sign up to the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. So what happens is they tell us when they're in opposition, they won't support this, they'll fight against it. And the minute they get into government, they say, oh, well, look, we had to sign up to it because it could have been worse. That's what we got. And many of our farmers, and this is a point I need to make for agriculture. I was running a group at that point called Southern Basin Communities. I'd left the Victorian Farmers Federation because they're selling us out, started my own group. And many of the other groups of farmers who were supposedly fighting against the Murray-Darling Basin Plan wouldn't listen to the things I was trying to say, the things we need to be saying and doing. And long story short, they didn't want to say too much. They didn't want to upset people. They didn't want to believe in conspiracy theorists or whatever. And they got their backside handed to them on a plate. So not only did they take the water they wanted, the government is now coming back to take more. And they are doing that because our farmers, the agricultural sector, were weak. In fact, pathetic. They would not fight. They wouldn't listen. They wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't hear what I was saying. They wouldn't listen to the facts, the evidence. And they got smashed. And many of them were sent bankrupt. Many of them ended up committing suicide because of the things that were happening. And that is because our farming sector that has so much power would not fight. And they wouldn't listen. So there's some fairly heavy-duty messaging here, but these are the facts. And we are at the 59th minute of the 11th hour right now. And we're in the business of losing all our farmers, completely, the whole lot of them, across the country. So therefore, our farmers have an opportunity now to stand up, to get in business with what we're doing, and take a stance to protect your own lives, your own families. In fact, the entire country has a responsibility to that. So these are the things that we're pushing. And very, very sadly, right now, down in Victoria, we're dealing with a heap of farmers there who are now going crook about the renewable infrastructure that's being built on their properties. and they haven't learned a damn thing. Honestly, we've been to the meetings, the Say No to AMO, Option 5, and the groups against the VNI project, all this sort of stuff, and they also are not listening, because we've been to the meetings and said this is how the government works. They will seduce you. They will come along and tell you how much they will fight for you and what great people you are and how much they need our Australian farmers. Oh, they're going to look after you. You're being sucked in, conned, lied to and seduced. And the whole thing is based around stopping you from taking any action, the likes that I'm talking about, and that is to come on board and, as an agricultural community, a farming sector, say to the world and to Australia, yes, this is a big plan. Yes, they're doing this and that and the other thing, and that's what we need to fight on, because we would get the community on side very quickly. And if we all did that together, then this whole disaster, we would flatten it in a week. We all heard the term, let's flatten the curve. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. How'd that go for us? But what I'm saying is, if we all work together fighting as one, we would knock this over very, very quickly. And we would see a lot of our politicians in jail. We'd see a lot of them, for mine, I'd like to see woodworking classes come into the public square and build some nice, sturdy structures with a few ropes hanging on them. I'd like to see Nuremberg 2, because that is what we're dealing with. That is the magnitude that we're dealing with. We're talking about global genocide. Yes, we are. That is exactly it. Many people might not like to hear that stuff, but I can tell you, you're going to like it a whole lot less when it's bashing your door down and you no longer exist, because that is literally where this is going. So our agricultural sector has the capacity to fight this. And we have the capacity to be the leaders. We've got the size, the strength, and the money to do it. We just have to combine. And I must say also, I've dealt with unions in the past. Union leaders are selling out their members. And I don't care what union you're with, the majority of them, there might be a couple of decent ones, but the majority of them are just following their instructions. The leadership are not fighting for their membership and their health and safety at all, their jobs, their prosperity. They're in the business of selling them out. So, we get a lot of people, whether it's farmers, whether it's union members, who are paying a lot of money to be a part of an organisation that's in the business of wiping you out. So I'd say you can see Billboard Battalion is on the road where we're going around Australia telling you the messaging that you need to know and that is true, honest. We don't pull punches. We tell it as it is. So I'd say to everybody, stop paying money to the groups and organisations that you think represent you, the ones that fraudulently take your money because they tell you that's what they're doing when they're not. And throw it in with Billboard Battalion, because we're running a fairly intense operation and most of what we do is self-funded. It costs a lot of money. And while we're away, we're not doing our businesses, we're not doing our jobs, we're not doing whatever. And that costs a lot. Just the running expenses cost a lot. So I'd say to people, particularly our workers, businesses and farmers, you're all in the gun. You have the crosshairs on your forehead right now. And we are running out of time to fight this. So one of the things that we need is funding. We need dollars and cents, because engines don't run for nothing. Food isn't given to you for free. There's a lot of things that happen that need to be paid for. And now we get people from all over Australia, and in fact, even over to New Zealand, who are saying, can you bring Billboard Battalion to our communities, to our areas? And the question is, yes, we can. Do we want to do that? Yes, we do, because this is what we do. We're in the business of waking people up because power is knowledge. And if people have the knowledge, then we can create critical mass. There is effective fighting forces in numbers. That's where we're at. But one of the main things that stop us from being able to go around the country to all the people who want us is money. Let's put it point blank. The government funds an enormous amount of groups, and by the government I say they use our money to do it, who are fighting against Australia. Well, we don't get government funding, and I'm pretty sure you can work out why. They're not real fond of us. So therefore, we need to rely on the decent people of Australia. And part of what we need to do is to make people understand that what I'm saying is real, and whatever you think you own, whatever you think you've got, you're not going to own it and have it for much longer. And this is what they tell you. People may have heard of a bloke called Klaus Schwab, #1 terrorist. Makes a little bloke from Germany who had that little moustache look like an amateur. So at the end of the day, he says, you will own nothing. And you know, I'd rather cut that bit off, because I don't see how you're going to be happy. I see you're going to be in a box in the ground is where you're going to be. So let's just take the first half of it. You will own nothing. Well, I put it to you, that's true. Whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, the evidence is, as I've been talking about here today, that is what's happening. So we have a capacity to fight back. And Billboard Battalion is the #1 tip of the spear organisation in Australia who's talking about what we're talking about. There's no one else going around doing what we're doing. No one. So therefore, I say to everybody, people watching this live, people here in this room, people in the industry bodies, get on board with what we're doing and give us a hand. We need numbers, we need people, and most importantly, I'll say again, we need funding. In order to do our work, in order to go around to the country and visit all the people in the areas who want us to go there, then we need to be able to pay for it. And that's one of the big ticket items that we need to talk about, because things don't work on nothing. And the thing I say to everybody is, people might look at that and go, well, you know, I support what you're doing, it sounds great, but we're not going to put any dough in. But once again, you might have missed the bit where we said, they are coming for you and you're going to have nothing. And one of the things that we've been really promoting, and what we've seen come to the fore, is a thing called land rights, cultural heritage laws. We saw a vote just last year about a vote on going to a voice. That was defeated. And one of the reasons that was defeated was that we started to see in Western Australia, under the idea of Aboriginal cultural whatever, people were starting to be shut down. The local land care group was going to have to pay $2.5 million to one of these extortionists, Aboriginal land councils, who wanted this money under some garbage, whatever. But the fact is, this is happening, this is real. And so the people of Western Australia started to see that their land, they're about to lose it. They're about to lose the ability to do anything on it. They will be put out of business. And there may be some good people who work on some of these land councils. I'd like to know who they are if there is. But what they are basically turning out to be is the strong arm end of the World Economic Forum plan to shut down your land. And this will involve not only farms, your local house, where you live, clubs, any structures and buildings, anything that involves land. And that's pretty well everything. And then they'll be able to tell you what you can do with it. More importantly, what you're not allowed to do with it. They'll also be able to tell you how much that you're going to have to pay in compensation or rent or charges for the place that you already own. So these things are very, very serious and they're very real. In Western Victoria right now, there's 10 shire councils who have been ordered by the state government to start bringing in Aboriginal policies. And once again, I'm making a very, very short story out of, we're not doing it justice because we can only do a few dot points. But this is a conversation that could take all day in its own right. So what we're seeing is that councils now under these orders from the state government are told to have agreements with land councils. And they will control virtually everything council does, planning permits, planning generally, the water systems, the roads, public land. And if we look at the planning, then that's going to involve every building, structure, person in those shires. And they have to follow whatever these land councils' garbage is. So I'm here to tell you that we're in a lot of trouble. Their attack has many, many forms. Their attack has many different weapons. And climate change is some. Aboriginal cultural heritage, that's other stuff. Now, a lot of the green tape, the red tape, it's all designed to shut us down. And this is why I talk about the big picture. We see a lot of people who go crook about something, but then there's other people go crook about something else. You know, we've seen the shutdown of the logging industry in Victoria down in Gippsland. We were at one of the protests there. I was speaking about the shutdown of the logging industry. This stuff is real. It's happening. We've got many of our national parks now in Victoria that are virtually locked up and you can't go there. This is real. This is happening. If people get off a track or they have a swim in a dam or a channel or something in these areas, thousands of dollars of fines. That's if you get off a track. So they're shutting this stuff down. This is real, it's happening. And what we're being told under the plan, under the 17 sustainable goals, is that we are going to have human-free zones where you're not allowed to, a human's not allowed to be there, if you think about that. And you might wonder how they're going to enforce that. Well, one of the ways is with their renewable energy. And if we think about renewable energy and we think about what we're told, I want you to understand that the renewable energy infrastructure has no possible way of working. It cannot possibly work. They are blowing up our coal-fired power stations. Literally with explosives, they're blowing them up. So we're going to end up stranded with a system that cannot work. This is where they're going with it. And I must say that for people who think, oh, we've got to blow up our coal-fired power stations and shut them down, China is building 2 new coal-fired power stations every week. So you're being totally and absolutely lied to. And what's going to happen is the energy system, the electricity system here will collapse, and they're going to say we're going to have to move people out of areas. And they're going to blame you for it. They're going to say, you greedy people, you've created climate change. The farmers have created climate change. Industry has created climate change. The fact that you want to own a car because their plan is that you don't own a car, not one of these electric buzz bombs, mobile fire hazard, unworkable. They don't want you to have anything, no car. They don't want you to move and travel. We're seeing the creation of, in England now, no better example exists than their smart cities, their 15-minute cities. And for those who might not know, the 15-minute cities are about you being locked down in a very small area, locked down permanently. That's it. So these things are real, they're verifiable. For the people who say we're just conspiracy theorists, Have a look at that stuff. Now, I want to have a look at how we can fight back of this, how we can kick this in the guts, while we still have a very small chance. And as I said, number one, we need to start getting into our politicians, because they are the Achilles heel. Number two, we need to start getting information out into our communities. We need to get people to understand this stuff is happening, it's very real, and they need to fight back now. And one of the primary ways that I want to do that is to say that every person or business has people who are involved in their finances. For farmers, we might have real estate agents, we might have stock and station agents, you might have agronomists, you've got business advisors, financial advisors, you've got bank managers and accountants and lawyers. And that is similar to every other person, you know, whatever business you've got, whatever you've got going on, you have all those people. And what I want to do is create a situation where we get these people to understand that although they're living a fantastic lifestyle, they think they're on gravy, they got plenty of money, plenty of land, they go on their overseas holidays every year, that they're about to lose that in very real terms. We need to get them to understand this, because these people have got the clout, they've got the money to start to push back very hard. And if we can get them to understand there is a credible threat to everything they've got and their life, then all of a sudden they're going to have a refocus, because at the minute they don't care, because they think they're going just great. And there's many other people that fit in that category as well. But we need to start pushing back. And as farmers or people in business, we have the capacity to get onto these people and say, what is this stuff? What is the Great Reset? How does this affect my business? I'm paying you money to advise me or to be involved in my business. Why are you not telling me of this threat? What do you know about it? Do you know anything about it? And when many of them are going to say, well, look, I think it's just, no, it's all going good, just nuts, conspiracy theory, not right. We need to push them, because these people are a big part of the answer to our problem. And if we can get these people to understand what's happening, then all of a sudden you get a very powerful army working on our side. One that would terrify the hell out of the politicians, because these people would be putting the pressure on them as well. And I know a number of these people, and it's very, very hard to get them to understand this. And this is where we need critical numbers to bombard them with phone calls and questions and make this the most important thing in their day and their night and the next day and the next night. Because once they start to do the research and nut it out, then we're in business, we're in the game. There are things that we can do. We have many people who go away saying, oh, well, you know, but we didn't have a plan of action. There, right there is, and I'll underline this in red, here is a part of your plan of action. So how many people, since we've been going around this circuit, have actually got onto these financials in their lives and actually pushed them and actually asked them? So we need to get groups of people put together, seeing as how individuals don't seem to want to do it. They should be. We need to get groups of people who will take this task on. We need to get people who will report back to us and say what the results of those calls were, so we can publish that and start to build pressure. Because all your, for farmers here, your stock and station agents and your real estate agents, your agronomists, all these people, they are the ones we need to push. And in many cases, we are friends with them. You don't want to push them, because we all know that pushing a lot of this stuff, we've lost friends and family. Well, you're going to lose a lot more. So we need to fight it now. So these are things that we're talking about. So we need people, as I said, to help kick in with money for Billboard Battalion, and they need to be wanting to get involved in what we're talking about here, because we have the power. And I can tell you right now, we're going to get to a situation, if we can't win, we're get to a situation where everybody is all of a sudden worked it out. They're going down. They're going to hit the ground hard. And they're going to sit there and say, number one, why didn't someone do something about this? And that is something that will happen. And then they're going to say, well, when this was going on, why didn't I listen? We'll have to try and do something about it, but it will be too late. And I'll tell you one of the things about the digital currency and how this is going to affect you. In terms of our food production and ag, you're not going to be in business if you don't have a market. And what the government simply will do is say, your programmable money, we will switch it off. They'll say, you bought a couple of snags this month, you bought a piece of steak this month, you've used up your allocation. And all of a sudden, you won't be able to sell your meat. They're going to say you've used up your allocation of bread or milk or whatever, and you won't have a market. So therefore, once again, the farmers who think I'm talking things that aren't correct, no, you are wrong. That's the whole purpose of bringing in a digital currency. They're going to tell you it's about, you know, money laundering or fraud or keep your money safe or whatever. It's not. That's how they will shut you down. That's one of the ways. And as I've said, there's many ways. So if you can't sell your produce, that's for you, you're stuffed. Game over. End of discussion. And this is one of the ways, in conjunction with all the land issues, with all the paying the taxes for carbon taxes, having your fertilisers shut down, having your herbicides shut down, having what animals you can have on your place shut down, what crops you can grow. Quite literally, this is happening. You look all through Europe. England's a prime example. The Netherlands are a prime example. For those who may not know, have a look at the European farmers that are going crook over there. Massive protests. The stuff you're not going to see on your national media. But the stuff is easily available on social media. And ask yourself, if you see going down their autobahns in their cities and their highways, 1,000 tractors moving as one, heading into the cities. The question you need to ask yourself, was that something someone came up as a good idea to fill in a Saturday afternoon? Are they doing that for some kind of recreation? Or is something wrong? Are those farmers reacting in a way they've never done before? In Europe, they might have done a bit, but nothing on the scale or magnitude of what they're doing. And that's happening because they now understand, they're seeing the real impacts of the policies that are bringing in to wipe them out. That's why they are doing this. So this is serious. It's very huge, and it's happening. It's coming to you now. And by the time we work it out, if no one leads the charge, then it'll be too late and you'll be finished. The Netherlands are in the business of wiping out 3,000 farms. We're seeing massive commitments to reduce livestock numbers. Throughout other countries, we're seeing enormous initiatives to pay farmers not to grow food. That is happening. So we need to understand that the push is on, and this is going to affect us all. And I must say that our farmers also have things called families, and they need to eat as well. So they're not going to be eaten either. So from this point on, you know, we're going to Western Australia from here, just do exactly the same thing as what we're doing here. And then the plan is to come back up here to Rockhampton for little thing they got up here. What do they call it? Beef Week. And when I say a little thing, that's a bit of sarcasm. So in the Rockhampton area, everywhere you go, they got cows, they got pictures of them, they got statues of them. The beef industry, we're here in Emerald. The beef industry is around here. People grow cattle. Well, you're not going to be growing them for much longer. You're not going to be doing anything for much longer unless we fight this. So our intention is to go to Beef Week and start pushing what we're pushing here, or continue it. And I know that there'll probably be a few people who are going to get a bit of pushback because they don't know what we're talking about. They know that they're good farmers, or they think they are. But like I say, the most important thing to your farming is politics, absolutely by a million miles. Because it doesn't matter how good a farmer you are, they can wipe you out overnight with one signature on a piece of paper. And we need to look at the cattle industry in the top end. A few years ago, we saw the entire live trade stopped overnight of cattle to Indonesia. And that had a massive impact on the top end and on cattle stations in the territory to WA and Queensland. Massive. So when I'm saying they can knock this out overnight, trust me, they can. So the people who just think it'll be right, mate, wrong, better think again. So this is one of the major reasons why we're doing what we're doing, is because we can see this is going to be over. And I want to say that I got onto a crowd there just recently called Ringers of the Top End. It's a Facebook page. Has quite a lot of members. And I put on there a video that I did in Echuca sale yards. Echuca's in north central Victoria, Australia, for international people. And, you know, I think it was about the destruction of the red meat industry. It had 36,000 views in a very short period of time. And we put it on Ringers from the Top End, having some issues there. Because a lot of the comments are being knocked out by the admins. And they're probably not going to like me saying this, but I don't care. Because we are dealing with a life and death situation, quite literally. So they seem to have shut down. For a start, they wouldn't put my video up there at all until I got onto them and give them a bit of a hard time. Because I have a platform, as you can see right here. I'm quite happy to talk to Australia and the world about the admins from Ringers of the Top End. No problem at all, because we're dealing with people who are going to lose everything. So I'm prepared to use any platform or any sort of medium that I can. So at the end of the day, we've now got a couple of comments. They put the video up after much problems, but then you don't see any comments. And I know huge numbers of people have got onto us at Billboard Battalion and said, we've tried to comment on Ringers from the Top End about your video. And if you look on there, there's a note that says comments have been shut down by admin for Ringers from the Top End. So I would just say we want to make sure we give these people plenty of publicity, and I'll talk about them all the time, because we're not here to play games. We're not here to do wishy-washy crap. We're here to tell the truth, shoot straight, and to save people's lives and their businesses. So I just say to Ringers from the Top End, admins, that once again, I've said it before, I'll just reiterate this because we're going to push this as hard as we can. We want you blokes to actually have a crack. We want you to get out of your comfort zone of being mates with the politicians or whatever the hell's going on with you, and run our stuff and run it hard. Because I can tell you right now, if you're Ringers from the Top End is about to be wiped out very seriously. All the cattle stations, the sheep stations, the cropping areas, the trucking businesses, the transport logistics, all the handlers, all the warehousing, the whole deal is about to go down. So you better get with the program. As I say, remember the names of the people who wouldn't let you hear it. That also would include all the mainstream media, which we do give a lot of a hard time to. So on that, we've got awareness here. We're educating people on what the situation is. And we're also giving people answers and solutions to how to deal with this. And this is not a situation where you just go, well, oh, that's tough, but who's going to fix that? Because this is very much a you thing. This is very, very seriously a you thing. Get with us and get with the program. Get in the fight, because it's your fight. And as I said, when you're over and done with and dusted and finished, the people who don't understand this and don't want to, they're the ones that's going to hit the ground hardest. And we don't want to see that. We do not want to see that at all. So we've got Beef Week coming up in another month or so. We intend to come back to that. And that's one of the reasons why we came up to Rockhampton and Emerald. Emerald has a lot of ag around here. We really, really should have seen a huge amount more farmers and community members at these meetings. We should have thousands of them. We went to a meeting, to a protest in Canberra on the 6th of February. There was about a lot of the renewable energy, but that involves a lot of farming. And I estimate the crowd at $1,500 there. Billboard Battalion, my team was there. We should have had 150,000. And this is how the apathy in the agricultural sector is running. Not only the farmers, there should have been other community members there too. But at the end of the day, what I'm saying is probably going to upset a few people. And I'm very good. I'm glad about that. Not sorry at all. We don't do wishy-washy crap. If you want the wishy-washy, don't want to upset anybody, then that's down the passage there, second door on the left. Because we don't do that. We always shoot straight and tell you what's going on. And you should be listening very, very seriously and very intently. From what we've got in Australia in the ag sector alone, we should have millions of dollars of funding for Billboard Battalion overnight to go, right, let's nail this. You look at one station around here that loses everything, could be 10 million bucks involved in that. One station in WA, one dairy farm in Northern Victoria, one farm in Tasmania, the territory, it doesn't matter where you look. People are going to lose everything if they don't take action, and we should be able to get funding. We look at all the organisations supposedly about agriculture, all the union people, where are you? All the greenies, you reckon that you're supposedly supporting the environment, well you're not. Where are all the mum and dads who claim to love their kids and care about their kids? Because if you take no action, you don't care about them at all, because they are coming for them. All the grandparents who sit there and say how much they love their grandkids, they've got some trust account for them, they built the swimming pool, they go and take them to all the theme parks or whatever. If you care about your grandkids, you better switch on to what we're talking about and give us a hand, because you're not going to have grandkids. We know now that the programs that they've got are shutting down people. We've seen what happened with the so-called pandemic and the stuff that people are getting injections now. Like it or lump it, I don't care. If people don't want to hear this or that, that's very much a you problem. I'm not interested. Because I'm telling you what you're going to see is 100 million times worse. We get a lot of people come to our meetings that say, now we've had a couple of jabs or whatever, and we didn't know whether we'd be welcome. Well, yes, you are welcome. Everybody in Australia is welcome to Billboard Battalion's meetings. Everybody. There is no discrimination. We don't care. You're either people who are in the fight to save Australia or you're not. That's the only difference. And we're trying to help educate everybody to get in the fight. Because I'm telling you right now, the forces that are against us are dangerous, they are catastrophic, they intend on doing you incredible harm, and they will tell you there's another pandemic coming, because this is their primary weapon against us. And they will be building millions and billions and billions of more injections of poison. That is what they're doing. Whether you like it or not, we're not going to do wishy-washy here, I will tell you straight. And since I started doing this, we formed Billboard Battalion in 2022, winter time 2022. And I've been looking at this stuff for 40 years and ticking off the things as they're coming. And they've been saying to me for the last 40 years, they will use a pandemic as a weapon against the people. They will use vaccinations as weapons against the people. And I don't care whether you believe that or not, because I talk to a lot of crowds. And now if you ask people, do you know somebody who's died from COVID? And we've done this experiment. Virtually no one says they do. But you ask the crowd, do you know anybody who's died from the vaccine or been injured beyond belief from the vaccine? And almost everybody puts their hand up. So I don't back down from what I'm saying. I won't back away from that, because I've made it a point of knowing the people I'm talking about, the injured and the dead. And it's from one source only. So now we're going to meet a young lady when we get back from Perth. Horrendous stories. We've met so many people with horrendous, shocking stories. And part of what we're doing here is not to try and frighten people who are already in trouble. We're trying to frighten people who are going to get into more trouble. And we can't allow these people to just be thrown in the garbage heap with no recognition of what's happened to them. So this makes up a part of what we're doing. This is Billboard Battalion's platform. And this is why we are going around throughout the community to educate, warn people, and try and mobilise our country into a fighting force. And I'll just finish up by saying that, as I do many times, we look at the sacrifices that we're asking people to make, that we're making ourselves. At the very least, chuck in some money. And if you've got a lot of money, chuck in even more. Because we've seen in history 17-year-old kids who have lied about how old they were just to be able to sign up to the Army or the Navy or the Air Force. And they went overseas to fight our wars for us. And these kids and older people as well, you know, they were prepared to run out of a trench at 6 o'clock in the morning and charge heavy machine gun fire and heavy artillery fire and fight for us without batting an eyelid. And every Anzac Day, which is coming up very soon, now we pay homage to those people and we tell them how much we care about them and how much we remember them and how much we respect their sacrifices. Well, I'm telling you right now, as a country, we are kicking their sacrifices right in the guts. We're throwing everything, their legacy, their memory, and what they gave us in the toilet. Our politicians are doing that. And by our not having a go to fight for our country, we as a people are doing that. We are disrespecting our Anzacs and everything that they sacrificed for us. So at the end of the day, I say this: our Anzacs handed us a country that gave us prosperity, safety, democracy. It gave us everything we could ever wish for. And now it's our turn to pick up where they left off and fight for that. Because we see, and as we go around doing our meetings, we see a lot of people, older people who've come from Eastern European blocs, who have said our one mission in life, while they still had some, was to get away from the murderous dictators and the communism and the socialism and come to Australia for a better life, for safety, for prosperity, and where they could bring up families. And they scream at us, these old people, what the hell is wrong with you Australians? Do you understand what's coming? We risked our lives to get away from what you are allowing to come in. You're embracing it. You have no idea what you're dealing with. And they're right. So this is another reason why we do what we do. So I'm Wade Northausen from Billboard Battalion. We're here in Emerald, Central Queensland. And this is a part of our national tour. We're heading to Western Australia next week on Monday to continue this. So I hope people have got something from what we've had to say. We're giving it our best shot. We're giving it everything we've got. And I would ask all other Australians to do the same thing. So back us, support us. We're here to fight for you and back you and support you and your families. Because at some point, if they're wiped out, you're going to feel pretty ordinary about that, and you're going to say, we had an opportunity to do something and we didn't want to know about it. So on that note, get in the fight with us. We've got many of the answers that I think are going to work. We're going to give it our best shot. We're going to have a go. So thanks very much for coming, everybody, today. And we might call it quits at that. If anybody's got any questions, more than happy to answer questions. So thanks very much to everybody for coming. So if we've got any questions, we're happy to do that. Otherwise, we'll call it quits there and shut down our live, and it might be time for a bit of something to eat and a cuppa. All right, thanks very much to everybody. Good to go next.